Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila, you get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky. Like always, we try and find the most fascinating people inside and outside the world of human resources to talk to you about what's going on in HR data, analytics, and technology. Today, we have another repeat guest, our friend Holger Mueller from Constellation. Holger, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to be here again, David.
Thank you for joining again. And like always, we have our best friend on the podcast, co-host Dwight Brown. Hey, Dwight.
Hey, David. Hey, Holger. Great to have you here.
So, Holger, why don't you give us a little bit of background about who you are and what you do at Constellation for those people who hadn't heard about you? I can't believe anybody hasn't heard about Holger, but give us a little bit of background on who you are and what you do at Constellation.
You're too gracious, David. It's great to be here, right? So yeah, Holger Mueller, Constellation Research, there since 8.5 years, covering high-umbrella-wise what I call enterprise acceleration. Companies have to move faster and become more agile. And they do that with my two sub-research areas, which is about technology and people. We talk about the people side here a lot. The technology side is about when enterprises build software, what are the tools, platforms, best practice to do so. And obviously, a large part of that is influenced by the new technologies which enable new things like AI, big data, the cloud, and so on.
We'll provide the links for Holger inside the bottom so you can find out more about our friend Holger. But one fun fact that we don't know, that no one knows about Holger.
No, almost no one knows, right? So
almost. No, this has to be no one knows.
But no one knows.
We want the exclusive, Holger.
No one knows. Okay, the one that no one knows is that I was ranked in the top 10 in beach volleyball in Germany way down last century. So yeah, I used to play a lot of indoor volleyball. It was very hard to play beach volleyball because there's not much of a coast, and at the coast in northern Germany, there's always ugly and bad weather. So it's fairly selective for someone like me who lives like 400 miles away from it. So you're thinking like, I might play in the tournament. So you take Thursday, Friday off, you drive like for 8 hours after work, you get there next morning on Thursday, bad weather. Everything canceled. Way too windy to get a ball in the air. Right. Then you stay till Friday. Bad weather again. Sorry, no qualification, no playtime for you. Burn 2 days of holiday, $1,000 or German marks to drive up there and gas and hotel stays and so on. Yeah.
Wow.
Now I live in San Diego, right? And it would be so nice, would be so good to start my beach volleyball career out there, right? So these guys don't know how good they have it.
But you don't. Do you play beach volleyball now?
I don't have the time, and I don't have the body anymore, right? So too much. I played lots of indoor volleyball, 15 years of semi-professional, professional indoor volleyball. Takes a lot of toll. So I'm doing mostly endurance stuff right now, which is for another secret podcast.
There you go.
Longevity. All this jumping and fast things makes you big and bulky, and big and bulky doesn't live long compared that from the age of the Neanderthal, right? This Homo sapiens was like a fraction of what we are today. So,
wow, that's fascinating.
Now that's dedication.
Yes,
when you're willing to drive all that distance, knowing very well that the game could get canceled.
Yeah, well, it was the only way to do it.
So, Holger, what we wanted to speak to you about today is the use or the lack of use of artificial intelligence in the world of human resources.
Right.
And so the first question I have for you is, where have you actually seen AI being successfully used or being used with use cases that are, one could say, adding value to the business?
Hi, I'm Carmen Hudson. I'm the host of the Recruiting Book Club, and we're starting our second season. I'm so excited to bring to you another set of guests of recruiters who have written books. We are excited to have some very special guests this season. We've got Shally, we've got Craig Fisher, James Ellis, and quite a few other people that we're going to bring on board to tell us about what they wrote, why they wrote it, and maybe we'll veer off into a conversation about recruiting on all types of topics and subjects that happen in our industry. So I hope you can join us. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, obviously, in the most competitive part of HR, right, even talent management, talent acquisition, recruiting plays a huge role, right? Which candidate to prepare, which candidate to contact. And that really has paid off, has been working. So there's no question about that. Another interesting area has been in the area also in talent management or performance management. How to help a manager, which topics, which techniques to use for performance management, the one-to-one meetings and so on. Very interesting use case from that part. Last but not least, also an old industry problem tackled right before they even talked about AI, right, was flight risk. What kind of compensation do I need? And small combination, not so terribly complex AI, but what do I need to keep that person on staff? How do I pay a competitive salary? And then the distribution of the salary dollars and modeling that, right? Not necessarily AI, but getting closer to that and helping with that.
So the one that you started with, though, which I really want to pick on a little bit, you started with talking about recruiting first. Well, let's talk about recruiting, because I think a lot of us have experienced the recruiting part of AI where they're filtering out thousands and thousands of resumes or filtering through resumes to try and find the needle in the haystack. And I think one of the things that a lot of people are trying to do is to figure out what's the gaming strategy there. And is there a gaming strategy? Is the AI smart enough or mature enough to be able to find the best candidate, or is it finding good enough candidates through all of that noise?
Well, the question is always who the best candidate is, right? Because you only can hire one person. You don't even hire your number 2 and number 3 and don't know how they develop, right? Where it's really interesting is if you think about like the big consulting companies who hire a whole class, right? And you know how these people were ranked at the hiring moment, how they ranked at the end of onboarding and after 1 year, right? So that's the really interesting part. And interesting enough, many of the interesting recruiting AI pieces are coming from those white-collar mass hirers like consulting companies, some tech companies for the developers and so on. So that's where you can do the comparison. Most cases, you don't have the data to do the comparison. If you hired number 2 or number 3 or number 4, would they have been even better? Right? That's the big problem. But I strongly think that if you have the right data, which means you have to have the position of the skills needed for the job that you're posting, and you understand, and those are faithful, right? Everybody knows LinkedIn. I would always jokingly call LinkedIn the network of liars, right? I mean, true story here, right? I got endorsed by my dentist for enterprise software. so he's a nice guy, he's a smart guy. But
you have good conversations with him.
Yeah. No, I don't know if he puts me under for some dental work if I start fantasizing about enterprise software. But then even if I talk about can he judge as an expert, right? So it kind of takes away from my enterprise software reputation if someone finds the next person who endorsed me as my dentist, right? So what a fake profile that is, right? So that's a challenge, of course, with the quality of data. And AI, of course, machines can only be as good as the data they have.
And to that point, one of the problems that I have with AI is the training set, right? It's about what is it telling you, because it's using past history as the tool to train itself on where it should be hiring in the future. And we all know that there are lots of problems with the way recruitment has happened in the past.
Of course. No question about it. But the question is, how much can the perfect and complete view of the past help the manager make a better decision, right? If you hire for a future job, and you don't make that investment, you don't make that product and so on, then of course everybody said, we hired that person for that and that didn't happen, right? So on the projection side, I think equal AI and humans are bad, right? Because if you knew what the future holds, we would play the lottery, right? Don't, but I would play it, right? So,
and the model is only as good as the data that feeds it. So if on the back end you don't have that good data there, if organizations aren't diligent about collecting the data or governing their data or whatever it might be, your model's only going to be that good.
Right. And even, let's say, if you have the perfect data, you have stuff which is not in the data because something like COVID happens, right? My point is always on my statement here, and it's a block I have to write, like how COVID killed AI or paused AI for at least a year, if not 2 years, right? Because even if we had the perfect AI for everything in HR, I know who should work there. I know how much money they should make, how often I should pay them. I know how to motivate them. I know when they should work in workforce management. If we had everything perfectly done, all of a sudden everything changed. And there's no pandemic data set, right? Because even if we had the data set from 1918 or whatever, when the Spanish flu was out there, the economy was working differently, right? So we couldn't even say, hey, let's get at the last flu data set and let's apply that, right?
Sure.
So everybody would pause the emergency button to a certain point to see, let's check again if this perfectly working AI is working so perfectly during the pandemic.
I think you'd agree, though, Holger, that business cycles happen. And there are problems that happen, whether it's inflation, whether it's political issues, whether it's instability in certain global markets. And so the pandemic was a gigantic application of a big blip in the market.
Yep.
And so you have to be able to, or not have to, but you should be able to train your AI to be able to deal with market cycles and be able to, if not, because obviously nobody could predict the pandemic, but predict the downturns that actually happen every 3, 5, 10 years.
That's an absolute valid point, a very good point, right? So you have to have your models for downturn, you have to have models for the bottom and for the top and so on, whenever the top is. Absolutely right, very good point, right? The pandemic can seem like this. That's a very fair point. And no excuse, actually, but I'm just thinking that we hit the pause for that.
Sure.
Because there's other priorities too, because approving our applications to go into system is kind of something where the HR discipline is like super, super cautious, right? Anecdotally, I can't tell you the vendor. At a medium-sized bank, this was a success story after 3 years. Medium-sized bank, it was about the performance recommendations to be given to help a manager. And out of the box, the AI from that vendor was only helping in 50% of the performance reviews. So HR vetoed for getting it out, right? Which is like fundamentally flawed, because even if you only help in 50% of your
still good,
reviews, that is half of your company getting a better performance review, right? So they wasted 1.5 years to get in the low 80s when HR finally said, oh, that is good enough, right? So do the math with the 1.5 years, how many performance reviews would have been better, how many people might not have left or better understood, right? So there's a wrong understanding of there. And unfortunately, the HR professional is not the biggest risk taker across the executive table, right? And that manifests itself of all technology, but especially hurts something so mystic, non-tangible, non-explainable like AI.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things I wanted to bring up in one of the use cases that I actually have a friend who does assessments on sales teams. And what he does is he measures the skills of the sales teams and tries to predict based on performance, based on actual sales, who has the skills needed in this organization, and how do we model those, and how can we predict who's going to be a good salesperson and a bad? His name is Chris Quincy, and he does a really good job, and he uses AI to be able to find those skills, to be able to predict those skills, and to be able to train those other people inside the sales group. So it's not just the model itself, it's finding the skills based on an assessment, and then being able to utilize all of that data to be able to help fill in the gaps and give people what they need to actually be successful. And then they measure again to make sure it worked. So it's kind of completing the cycle.
And great use case, right? Companies spend inordinate amounts of money to train their salespeople, and moving the needle on your salespeople by only 1 or 2 percentage points is so much more revenue, right? So very, very interesting use case, and good to see that works.
Now, that's AI in HR, but if you could give an analogy to where AI is being successful on the business side, what are the examples that we could learn from in HR to say that's the kind of thing that will move the needle in HR? Other examples, so can you give us examples on the enterprise technology side where AI is being used successfully?
Yeah, I mean, you see it in beginnings across all the big tectonic automation plates of the company, right? So see it in finance and finding out which assets to sell or not to sell, how to evaluate them, how to close the books, how to do financial planning and analysis from any scenario planning side and so on. That's the popular things in finance. If you move over to classic manufacturing, the question there is like, how big should your stock levels be, right? Big reset also again from the pandemic.
Right, yeah.
As an example, right, the emergency button would have been hit there.
It would have been
potentially, or too late, right? Everybody hit it too late, even without much of the AI. AI wasn't the culprit, but they could have claimed the AI for it.
Sure.
Optimizing manufacturing flows, moving things in manufacturing, understanding what are the downtimes, where to move things, right? I mean, the fascinating thing is companies have moved from 1 or 2 manufacturing plants, say, for the month, to thousands being analyzed by AI and proposing and finding the best one, right? So very interesting. You see it in CRM, right, where basically it's still elusive, right? The big thing is next best action. What do I need to do next for a sales rep? What is the right thing? But there's some very interesting, better models in there. And kind of like related to it, right? I mean, the showcase for all of this and the trigger for many of these technologies that we take for granted today comes all out of the advertising space, right? So it's an extremely difficult situation to say which display ad to serve you, right? And we typically ignore them and don't look at them, right? But if you looked at like last year of the supposedly TikTok acquisition and forcing them to disclose their algorithms, right? The advertisement there is much, much better, right? And interesting enough, like I'm not a big, for instance, Instagram user. I only use it to keep tabs on what my kids are doing, right? So no digital exhaust there, right? So, but the Instagram ads are really good. So I buy more from Instagram than on any other tabs advertising things that are coming to me, right? So it shows like they figured something out, if it's AI or not, it really works well, right? So what I'm forgetting, like we talked about finance, manufacturing,
sales,
HR, CRM, suppliers, right? Purchasing, right? Similar big part, when to buy things, where to put them, what stock levels, estimating expenses, expenditures, right? But again, all those models would have been wrong figuring out how much the sales reps will travel, right? So, yeah.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
So let's go to one of those examples. Let's take the manufacturing example, and actually it's also the supply chain example. There's a component in there which are people, right? So if we have plans for a certain amount of revenue in a quarter, and we know how much supply we need, then in that case we certainly know how much demand of HR we need. We know what the workforce planning model would look like. And so that can inform how many hours, how many staff, in what skills, in what positions, and then also be able to tell us how much regular time and overtime we need to be able to complete what's the profitability of that particular revenue that we want to get.
Yes, great use case, yeah.
So the question is, how does that not flow? And maybe this sounds stupid, but how does that not flow into HR, and HR then be able to get what's our demand on the human capital? How many people do I need to hire, in what skills, in what positions, in what locations?
Well, it flows kind of ish over in the business plan, right, of doing workforce planning. But usually it comes in the form of yelling is, why don't we have enough forklift drivers, right?
Exactly.
Why don't we have enough welders, level Bs, laser certified? How could we run out of them? What happened, right? So it's really, that's the part of the challenge of HR, of course. It's not like a single function stovepipe, right? That manufacturing manager in charge of a shift, so in charge of a certain production unit, has to make sure that she has the capacity and the skills of people there. And then they open the job position, right? Or they say, we need to have better training. We have to certify people, right? So this is the decentralized nature of it, which makes it harder too, because it disenfranchises the HR people from the real process, right? If you compare HR people to finance people, they grow up in their function, but the finance people deliver finance in their function. The HR people liaise with the business, right? And if I don't understand what's happening in the business, if I know what happened in the business 5 years ago in manufacturing, it certainly will help me in 2022, but it's going to be very different in 2022. So those learning lessons stale and get older. That's a challenge for the HR people to really serve the business units they're working with.
Well, and I would imagine that one of the challenges is that you almost need specialized use case scenarios, because staffing for a forklift driver can be very different from staffing for an IT programmer, for example. Hospitals have been doing this for years, where they're trying to guess what sort of patient care staff they need at any given time based on the overall patient acuity within the hospital. And it's fluid all the time. Now, I would argue you can't necessarily take that model and superimpose it on IT programmers or forklift drivers, for example. And so I would imagine that any change with the AI ends up being sort of incremental as you work on these use cases and bring them together.
But I would argue that what Holger was talking about would be that HR should have flexed the muscle, or should have muscle memory, and be able to remember that they should be a part of the conversations. Or maybe I'm misinterpreting you, but they should have the skills built up in HR to know, if we're going to have this kind of revenue and this kind of business plan and work it out with the managers, then we're going to need this number of people at this time. And here's how much we can pay them, not about how much we need to pay them, but here's how much we can pay them. And here's where we're going to go find them. And solving for the where we're going to go find them becomes the problem for HR to get them there at that date, trained, ready to go, on the line to make whatever the widgets are, right? So
that's a big difference. Absolutely right. That's the big difference between finance and HR, because the finance people yell at the business and say something's wrong there.
Right.
Figure out what's wrong there, right? Fix this, right? It's not comparable and so on. The HR people usually are the one-way street in finding the forklift drivers, to stay with the example. They get yelled at for that, right? But they don't have the turnaround part of understanding why do we need the forklift drivers and so on. But the challenge overall, of course, to be fair to the enterprises, all the ERP vendors who are supposed to do this, right, lack badly on the overall planning side. Right? There was this big movement of strategic enterprise management and strategic planning. It has not been delivered, right? It's very much still an art in enterprises and usually optimized in the stovepipe and running on a great tool from a company out of Redmond, Washington, right, with this Excel, right? So if Excel could be productized in ERP, we would have all of these problems solved, right?
Well, people have tried. I mean, people have tried to take things that get done in Excel and they try and make it a product. And then what they realize is there's so much customization and configuration necessary that people go, I'm just going to do it over here. It costs less. It costs nothing. Right. But they say it costs nothing. And then you realize with all the errors people make in Excel, no, it doesn't cost nothing necessarily.
Well, it doesn't cost anything because I'm doing it on my free time and my weekends, right? So that's the deal with what people don't do to be in control of what they want to do or have to do, right? So it's a catch-22 there with the ERP systems, but really the planning needs to get better so we have the records for machines to learn, for AI to learn. This was the plan. What went havoc, right? If you can't look at 20,000 spreadsheets in the enterprise to figure out how many nurses do we need.
And that's an interesting thing, because if you could collect all of that data from all those spreadsheets, and if they actually had headers, and if they actually had a really good field structure and a row structure without multiple rows and without lots of sums and other things, then the AI could read it. Right. But because we make Excel spreadsheets like we look at a piece of paper based on the old forms that we used to create, which have a sum, they look like invoices. They have a sum on them. They do this, they do that. Yep. So machines could read it, but they'd probably fail miserably at being able to tell what the hell people were thinking about when they were looking at it, right?
Absolutely right. So, but David, you just unveiled what, if ever the Excel product managers listen to this, right, should really be doing as an evil plan. You can still make it look like your form and your invoice and so on. But in the background, the evil plan or the good plan is we capture everything in a standardized format to figure out what you've done there, and we connect the whole thing up.
But wouldn't that be just awesome? I mean, that is evil, but wouldn't it be awesome if there was a way for us to unstructure data and still have the understanding of the structure of it so that we could read into it and be able to understand the concepts that were being portrayed there?
Right. No, absolutely right. Right. The dream of any machine learning, software automation guru, right? And I think there's progress in that. You see that when systems get integrated from A to B, that basically was still a white collar job, right? Somebody has to say, oh, the postal code in the UK corresponds to the zip code in the US, right? But by now machines have enough data to figure out, I don't know what those 9 digits are. Oh, this might be a postal code. Let's see if there's a city field or place field. Let's see if I can find, like I make the example, I know it by heart, 92130, my zip code, and see if that's San Diego. Wow, bingo, I found this combination.
Right.
And now you can think about how many trial and error combinations could there be on social security numbers or serial numbers or English zip codes, postal codes, which are 6 digits and so on, right? So the machines can do a lot of more things. And the big thing which fuels it, right? A human needs time to get this done, right? And then it's a question how smart is he or she and how much time do they need and how committed are they to find out, right? A very different equation to a machine, because a machine all needs is someone program it, right? And thinking of possible solutions, maybe out of the Excels, right? Because if you would take all the Excels out of the world, we would right away know what a postal code and zip code is, right? And then it just means cheap compute, right? So if there's enough compute cycles, ultimately the machine will keep trying and find it, something where the human will never get to, right? This is the innovation which you see in healthcare for radiology, right? I mean, yes, a good radiology technician, a good radiologist will see something on the screen because he or she has seen this before. But it's completely unfair to go against the machine who sees millions and can compute thousands per second, right? So right. I can't believe that we're still leaving it to the human ingenuity to find out what's on your X-ray or whatever radiology thing, while we have the other data digitized, and the machine could be such a better job.
The machines have become a lot less literal than what they have been in the past.
And kind of taking on that, think about or watch something like one of those programs on Netflix, like that talk about the future, like Lost in Space, where they have a machine where someone could lay down, or this is Star Trek Next Generation, someone can lay down on a bed and a scanner can come over them, right? And the computer then scans the body for whatever is going on there. It says the good stuff and the bad stuff, and then it tells somebody in plain language what's actually happening with this person, whether they're human or an alien, and they have all of that data. I know that's science fiction, but
no, if Hollywood can do it, 20 years later, latest we can do it.
Exactly. But then watch the Jetsons and realize we don't have a car that flies. So
No. So the art is to figure out which 50% happens and 50% will not happen, right?
but what's fascinating, Holger, is that we think about what the future is, and this is a good place to start the end of the episode of the future of AI for HR. We've always thought about AI helping HR by telling managers and practitioners and department leaders what could they do within the boundaries of the law, within the boundaries of the budgets that we have.
Right.
What can you do that will help you, that could be successful inside the culture of the company?
Right.
Like you were mentioning before about turnover probability, which basically says what we've seen, and we built that model at ADP. What we've seen leads us to believe these 5 people are at high risk of leaving, and these 15 people are medium risk, and these 100 people are at low risk. What should HR focus on as the future to get AI into the business to help the business succeed? What would the future be? What would the future, if you could go into Lost in Space next episode and be the HR director, what would they be telling the HR director?
No, it's a great question, right? So, but I would tell the HR director to look for the vendor use cases, often coming from startups, push the existing vendors on the bigger data to help him in his enterprise or her to be more successful, right? And it's less, of course you can say, I would like to have help here, why can't you do it here? But for the first 1 or 2 years, if you just look what the vendors think is working and is ready to do and could be done, that will educate any HR director starting at 0 or at nothing very quickly, and to knowing what works, what does not work, and then make them more competent for after 1 or 2 years to say, I really need this. And I think you can do this, right? Because we have the data for that, and we could do this, right? And then all of a sudden, suddenly things are happening, right? So the 2021 moment for AI and HR still has to happen, like what happened for space travel, that we had a record number of people in space, right?
Yep.
And if somebody today says next year we'll have the record number in space, everybody's saying, I just have to figure out how many flights Blue Origin and whatever the other guys and so on. Of course, there's going to be more people in 2022, right? But the art was to figure out, hey, in 2021, there's going to be a record number of space, and they're not highly trained astronauts, but could be people like you and me who are ready to spend $500,000 or whatever it is. To be in space for a few minutes, right? And so that moment will come to HR, and the question is only, because it's not like a hey, I'm going to be in space moment, right? This is going to be really making a difference for a company. And if one company makes a difference compared to other ones, the other ones will notice. But if they can't react fast enough, these business cycles are always moving faster, hence my research enterprise acceleration.
Right.
And you really can't miss the space moment of AI happening. And maybe it's happening in 2022 as everything restarts. Who knows, right? So work with the vendors, see what's possible, get educated, learn what can be done, become competent, suggest what should be done, build some things yourself, right? Every company has the data scientists, potentially AI people who could do something there.
Awesome. Holger, thank you so much for joining. You're awesome. We always learn so much when you're here, and we really appreciate your support.
No, thanks for having me. And you can only be brilliant if you get brilliant questions, David. So that question made me think, made me get the cold sweat on my back. It's oh my God, he's asking me these tough questions. So
yeah, especially at 10:30 at night. So I apologize, Holger.
No. It's only 10:11 here where I'm.
Oh, okay. Well, you're not going to bed for a while, anyways. Then
easy time. No, I'm jet lagged here, so it's all good. So don't worry about it.
Well, Holger, have a wonderful holidays and enjoy yourself while you're there, and really relax.
Same to you. Happy holidays. Stay healthy, and thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. Dwight, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you being here, Holger, especially this late at night.
Anytime. Thank you, Dwight.
And thank you for listening. And if you appreciate the episode, please click subscribe. And if you know somebody who might find it fascinating, please send it on to them. Thank you very much. Take care and stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week, and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.